Assalamu alaikum students. Welcome to our next lecture, Programming Concepts. This will cover 8.1.1, the core topic of variables and constants, and 8.1.2, the topic of basic data types from your CIE curriculum 2210. Context. Let's study about different smaller terms that will help us in covering the topic next. The first one being, what are actually keywords? You must have heard the word keywords whenever you have tried to attempt any question in the examination. These are basically the reserved words that have a standard predefined meaning in programming or pseudocodes. For example, if you have used Python before, you must have known that in order to output something on the screen, you use the word print. Similarly, when you write pseudocodes and you have to take input from the users, you use the word keyword input. Or if you want to use any loops, then you use for, and if you want to output anything on the screen, you use print. Since these are the keywords, so these are always written in capital letters. We know now what are keywords. We now move on to the next term, which is the term identifier. What is basically an identifier? It is a name given to a program element such as a variable, function, or array. For example, the name num is an identifier that you give to a variable. If you want to add anything and you want to call a function, then you allot a name to it, and that is add. Or if you want to use any arrays in your pseudocode and you have to name those arrays, you basically uh, take an example, for example, the letters followed by the square brackets. Right now, I know you must not be doing what are variables, functions, or arrays, but just keep in mind that this is the name given to any element that is used and that is introduced in a pseudocode. Just like every person has been given a name that identifies that person, their personality, their existence. In a similar way, in pseudocodes, whatever element is introduced and is used in the code, it is given a name, and that name is known as the identifier. In our programming or in our pseudocode has to be named, and there are a few rules that needs to be followed when naming such identifiers. The first being that it must start with a letter. You must be remembering that in our previous slide, we tried to use the different examples, one of them being given the name num to the variable that starts with a capital letter, or the name letters given to an array that starts with a small letter, be it capital or small, but an identifier name always starts with an alphabetical letter. Plus, it can contain letters or digits, like you can use the name num1 for a variable as well. Thirdly, it cannot contain blanks, commas, or special characters. Means we cannot write num comma 1. It will be wrong. Similarly, we cannot write num at the rate 1 or num at the rate whatever. Both of these will be wrong because this is using special characters, which is not allowed in naming identifiers. Fourthly, it cannot contain more than 31 characters. So even if you have a very long scenario, you can just work on a few letters of that scenario. For example, if you have to take the temperature of a room, instead of writing the whole temperature as the name of the variable, you can write the word temp instead. So make it readable, make it shorter, and make it understandable as much as you can. And thirdly, it is case sensitive. What do I mean by case sensitive? For example, if you are using two variables, one of them is named num and the other one is named num. Both of these will be considered as two separate variables because here the num is starting with a capital N, whereas here the num is starting with a small n. This is what we say it's case sensitive. Means if it's starting or it is using capital letters, it will be considered a different variable as compared to the same name used in small letters. Up till now, we have been working on identifiers using the word variables and constants throughout. But let's sort out what are really variables and constants. Let's consider two cartons that are opened up. One of them is named as a variable and the other one is a constant. Now, even if you don't delve into computer science, we know that mathematically a variable is any value whose value is any number or anything, any data whose value completely changes during the execution of the program, whereas a constant's value remains the same. We have here a few examples from our practical life. Let's sort these examples out in each of these containers. The first one being the value of pi, which mathematically is termed as 3.142. Since this value is fixed, no matter how many times we use it, we will either use it at 22/7 or as 3.142, both of the values being fixed. Therefore, it will be termed as a constant. Today's temperature, which changes throughout the day. It's different in the morning, different in the afternoon, and different in the evening. So that means it will be termed as a variable. Age. Your age is changing every minute, every day, and every year. So it will be termed as a variable. Gravity of Earth has a fixed value of 10. That is why it will be termed as a constant. Level of water in the tank changes throughout the day as per the consumption. So it will be termed as a variable. Your NIC number is fixed. That is why it will be termed as a constant. Therefore, summarizing it, we can say that constants are all those data sets whose value does not change during the execution of the program. Some of the types here are mentioned: mathematical constant like pi, like exponent; physical constant like Planck's constant; numerical constant, any values 2 or 3; constant function, any value assigned to a function; and the character constant, for example, if you are taking the character A in particular, that remains the same during the program, it will be termed as a constant. But how we use identifiers to name these constants? When we are writing pseudocode, we have to follow a certain format. And the format being that we use the keyword constant together with the name of the identifier. Since constant will have a name, that will be termed as an identifier, followed by an arrow and then the value of that constant. For example, if you have to specify that the hourly rate in any factory is 6.50 rupees, that means it's fixed no matter how many workers are going to work there. So you're going to use the word constant to declare that this variable, or sorry, this data set is a constant value. You will use the word constant followed by the name, which is hourly rate here, followed by an arrow, and then the value that you assign to it, 6.50. You don't write rupees here because then it will change the type of this constant. This will go in the alphabetical type, in textual type, and this will go in the numeric type. So we will go into these details a little further, but right now just keep in mind that without using the units, you are just focused on the values instead. Another example is of a constant by the name of default text, which is assigned the value n/a. So whenever we are using identifiers for any constant, two things are fixed: the word constant and this arrow pointing towards the identifier. Whereas variables are all those values that keep changing throughout the execution of the program. For example, if you are using a variable by the name of x and right now initial value that you are taking is 10, whereas you are using another variable y whose initial value is taken as 5. In the memory, how do you assign it? In the memory, actually, this is a memory in which you are giving up as soon as you give the name x and y to it in the declaration statement. It will assign the value memory space and name it as x, and another memory space and will name it as y. But as soon as you give a value to it, that value will automatically go into that memory space that you have already given name for. How do you declare a variable? You use the keyword declare in capital letter, followed by the identifier, then colon, and then the data type of that identifier. For example, here x is given a value 10. You know that x is a variable whose value will change and whose value is given a certain integer as the value. So you will use here the keyword declare, which will remain constant. The name identifier that is given to this variable is x, followed by a colon, which is also constant, and the data type. Since this is numeric, so I prefer using it as an integer. So this is the context that you follow. In naming variables, two things will remain constant: the word declare and the colon in between the identifier and the data type. In declaring the variables, you must have noticed that I use the word data type after colon. What are data types? These basically define the type of data that will be assigned to a variable. In the previous case, it was integer since we were giving a numeric value 10 to the variable x. Now, why use data types? The first one being it helps in an efficient storage. It ensures that data is stored appropriately, means numbers are stored in the numerical part of the data and the characters are stored in the character part of the memory. Secondly, the effective manipulation of the code. It allows specific operations to be performed. For example, if you are taking anything as character, obviously you cannot perform addition or subtraction to those characters. For that, you'll have to take numbers. Thirdly, automatic validation. It helps the system catch errors by ensuring the data entered matches the expected format. For example, if in the code you have defined that the data you are expecting for the user to enter is a numeric one, obviously it will give an error as soon as you will try to enter a character into it. So this will help in automatic validation of the data entered by the user. The data types as per their categories. The first one being the integers. These are whole numbers, either positive or negative. For example, if you use the numeric value -15 or 0 or 42, all of these are whole numbers, whether positive or negative, and they will be considered as integers. From practical life, if we use the example of the number of passengers in a flight, it is always a numeric value, a whole number value. So it will be taken as an integer. Whereas the number of students in a class will also be termed as an integer. The next type of the data type that is also numeric is real. These are numbers with decimal points, or in other words, we can say these are numbers with fractional parts. These will also can be either positive or negative. For example, minus 1.5, 3.14, 10.0. These all consist of decimal points and a fractional part. So they will be termed as real data types. For example, the temperature of a room can be 25.5, 25.3. When we talk about accuracy, they will be taken as real. Weight of a person can be in 25 kgs and 5 grams to think about accuracy, or even if you are talking about pounds, it can be in decimal places. So it can be taken as real. Or the distance between galaxies or the diameter of an atomic nucleus can be expressed with the same unit of length but in decimal places. So they can be also taken as real. It's not necessary that the temperature of a room or the weight of the person or distance is always taken as real. We can take it as integer as well. And if you want to go for the accuracy, it's totally up to you. You can take it as a real data type. So when we talk about the numeric data type, it comes under only two categories. The numeric one can be either integer or real. Now we move on to the textual data type. The first one being char. These are non-numeric characters and a single character. For example, capital A, small a. These are all under the category of char. Entering F for female and M for male. These are examples. F and M are those variables that can be taken of the data type char because we are assigning a single character to it. Entering the name of an individual one letter at a time can be taken as a char because we are dealing with one letter only. Or in other words, we can say that if there is any question that states that only take the first letter of the name, that will be taken as a char. The next textual data type is the string. Several characters in a length make up a string. This can include letters, digits, and printable symbols. An empty string is a string with 0 characters. But if a number is stored as a string, it cannot be used in mathematical calculations. For example, if you are entering the words no soya sauce whenever you are trying to type in the menu or type in your choice while ordering the food, this specification, since this is a series of characters, will be of the data type string. Or if you are trying to enter the address, the home address of any candidate or the email address of any candidate, you will take it as string. And last but not the least, the data type will include logic and truth, is the simplest yet most powerful data type for decision making, and that is Boolean. This is the one that is used in the detailed questions, especially the scenario based questions that you have in your CI exam. This holds only two values, either a true or a false, and is used extensively in selection and in iteration. Now, what are selection and iteration? We are going to discuss this in our future lectures. But for now, just remember that this is a very strong data type that is sometimes used to make the decision whether to proceed further or not, or whether to continue the execution or to stop the execution, because the only output or the only values that it gives are true or false, and on the basis of this true and false, further decisions are made. For example, a yes or no to any query will be taken as Boolean. A standard light switch can only exist in one of the two states: true if the light is on, false if the light is off. Or when you check if your front door is locked before going to bed, you are checking a Boolean state. The name, the identifier given to that state is door locked, and the value that is assigned to it is a true if it is locked and a false if it is not locked. How to use these data types? Let's take an example from the program code that will help you uh, accommodate or to use this information in programs. For example, the question is a smart home system records the current temperature in a room as 24.5. Which data type should be used to store this value? You know that the value given here is 24.5, and we already discussed that for any numeric data we have only two options, either integer or real. Of it, integers are whole numbers whereas real is a fractional part, and this includes a decimal point and a fractional part. So the data type that will be assigned to it would be real. Now, what is the name of the identifier? What is it actually? It is the temperature of the room. So instead of taking temperature in a room as an identifier, we can only squeeze it down to temp. So the declaration statement you will use for this variable is declare temp colon real. Another example is of a library database which uses a field to track whether a book has been returned or is still out on loan. Suggest the most efficient data type for this field and declare it. The data type, the identifier that has to be used here is the status of the return. So I just use the variable name status here. And this status can be either returned or out on loan. So it can be either true or false. So we can take it as a data type Boolean. Because if we write down the status true, that means it has been returned. And if it is false, then that means it's still out on loan. Or you can take the values otherwise. You know how to store the data in your database. So the declaration statement that would be made for this variable is declare status colon Boolean. Let's work on the exam style question. Figure 3 box shows an algorithm represented using pseudocode that calculates the delivery cost of an order from a takeaway company. This is the pseudocode that it is used. State the most suitable data type for the following variables in figure 3. The first one being the delivery cost. Let's see how delivery cost is used here. In the third line, the delivery cost is assigned a value 0.0. And then after this, where is the delivery cost used? The delivery cost is used in this line, in which you are assigning a value 1.5 to it. And then again in this line, in which you are assigning it the value order total over 10 multiplied by 2. So as seen from these statements, the value of the delivery cost is constantly changing. That means it's a variable. Now, which data type will be assigned to this variable? Here, this is including a decimal point with a fractional part. So that means the data type used here would be real. The next one being message 1. For message 1, let's see where message 1 is used. Message 1 is used here in the fourth line, where it is assigned the value minimum speed not met. Then message 1 is output here. So since this holds the value, we cannot a textual value, and textual value can be either char or string. Since this is not a single character, so we cannot take it as char, but it is a series of characters, so we take it as a string. I hope students, you must have understood the topic up till now. You can go and solve the questions that are posted on the portal, on the YouTube channel, and practice it more. Until the next lecture, thank you so much. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.